All right, so here we go. Take three. Well, a lot of times I find that I have a few little notes. It just comes to mind in the morning. And I throw it together and then I do a take or I do it and I find out it's almost nonsense or something. And this time I had the dogs barking, but it probably wasn't ready to finish it anyway. Also, I haven't mastered it in any way, shape, or form how these videos get created. I've only figured out a little bit on how to have myself on the screen and have a few words. We'll see if this works. So it's January 12th, 2024. This is an interesting video. I hope I don't have to make two videos to get it done. But my last one, I felt that I needed to define Vedanta. I can't believe I didn't. And prior, but I don't know if it would have worked. So here I went all the way to the 15th video and I finally defined it. And I think it worked. I don't know. Don't know if anybody will ever view it. But this one, you would think I would have brought this up before. It's the where are we headed? We're headed towards freedom, self-realization. Well, there's all sorts of different aspects of what's called in the book Shankara. It's called Illumination. So I'm just going to name this video Illumination just because some of the quotes are going to be from one of my favorite books, Shankara, The Crest Jewel of Discrimination. Shankara of the year 700 or so, one of the greatest swamis of all. And so we'll just call it an illumination. All these words I've heard over 50, 60 years of those, or in the 60s and 70s, we heard peace, love, illumination, self-realization. Great. One with God. If you listen to a lot of the songs out of the 60s, which I love the oldies, it's amazing how many of them talk about being one with God, one with consciousness, the light. So I'm going to actually get into some definitions here, and I'm going to steer away from experiences that I've had. I don't know. One of the things I've mentioned many times is that I love the whole idea of many paths, same God, many paths, same consciousness, many words, same truth. And in the same way, what we are going to get out of our paths is going to be different. The idea that we all are going to have some kind of same result seems ludicrous. Now, maybe we have illumination, but it's going to sound different. Maybe, I actually, because the paths are so unique and our character is so unique. Some people are very much into love and worship and serving others. Others, the path is working. It's karma yoga, and the other is the path of knowledge. And those paths are unique. The path, one is known as thou art that. Thou art realizing that everything is God and that one is with that, one with God. Thou art that is the quote. Another is more of a separation of spirit and everything else. And that seeker might end up I have no interest in anything out there. They're just purely into consciousness. But the one that follows bhakti yoga or love and worship might just love everything and everyone. It's just a similar end possibly. All is one, but a different and unique path based on our experiences and our karma and our character. So, I was one of these first definitions I'm going to bring up. It was interesting. I was looking up. I'll bring it up in a minute. Let's just start with this. So the first little words I'm going to bring up these are just really reminders. And it's from the book The Sermon on the Mount according to Vedanta Hinduism. And it says, so this is kind of more of a review, but reminders that we are spirit, we are pure consciousness, whatever words we want to use for it, and we have coverings. And those coverings are mentioned right here. We get attached to the coverings. We get attached to the body. We get attached to our mind, to the senses. We think these are who we are or what's valuable. And then we, as they describe, out of our ignorance, we lose sight of who we are. And all we're doing is remembering who we are. So it says, what prevents us from realizing the truth that God is within us? Consciousness, spirit, truth is within us. It's our ignorance, the false identification of our true nature, which is spirit. So we're falsely identifying, as it says, with body, mind, senses, and intellect. So just keep that in mind as we go along. I thought that somehow that might apply. It kind of almost defines the path, or a path that I find valuable. Then we get into what I think, maybe it was video number 12, the four immeasurables. And let me tell you, I think Ramakrishna, Vivekananda all said the same thing, but I like how these are defined and laid out. That's the only reason I'm putting out the four immeasurables from the Lord Buddha. He defines love in Buddhism is wanting others to be happy. He defines compassion, wanting others to be free from suffering. And number 3 is joy. And number 4 is equanimity in Buddhism, means to have a clear-minded, tranquil state of mind. And notice it says, and not being overpowered by delusions, mental dullness, or agitation. So I think all of these are great definitions. You can meditate on these things. So the reason I bring this up is we have this whole idea of coverings, and we can use the four immeasurables, or many other videos where I talk about just meditating on truth, love, consciousness, God, whatever. Here's the four immeasurables. Meditate on those. And where are we going with all of this? That's why I brought this up. There's another little interesting definition that comes up a lot if you read Ramakrishna. And they talk about how he just naturally almost existed all the time in what was called nirvikalpa samadhi, or that he would go into meditation and very quickly. It sounds wonderful. Apparently he could be there for days on end. And I've seen some videos on TV of some Buddhist yogis that, or maybe they were Hindu, I'm not sure, that could just exist in what was called nirvikalpa samadhi. Basically where the physical universe disintegrates, doesn't exist for them. They're in, as it said, in the second stage of samadhi, a meditative state of total absorption and bliss. And they would show these various yogis sitting under trees for hours on end. I haven't done that. I've done some long meditations, and I enjoy my meditations. They were very difficult in the beginning. It was hard. The mind just gets to stirring and scurrying around. And I will tell you that I said I wasn't going to talk about my meditations, but no, a few comments just to personalize it. But there was a point where it was hard, kind of a difficult challenge to let go of the attachments, to let go of all the images and all the things that would fly around. And eventually it got to a point where that just all went away. It just kind of went quiet. And I found that whether you call it living in God, living in consciousness, living in the joy, that love. So we're learning to be focused on those things, but not in a hard way. It has to be in a meditative, simple, easy, we just are. And yeah, I think it's interesting. If you read those books, you're going to see this word, nirvikalpa samadhi, a lot. When it says in the second stage, I don't even know what that means. I found that from the website called Yogapedia. There was also an interesting one. I know that I've seen this person on TV, but I don't know who he is. Deepak Chopra. I guess he's got a lot of, believe he's a Hindu. and a doctor, and he's written a lot of books. I haven't read them. I don't know that much about him, but his definitions of samadhi came up next, right after Yogapedia. And his were very complete, very lengthy. So if you wanted to get that kind of explanation, there you go. I like simplicity. To me, you're in a meditative state of total absorption and bliss. Great. There you go. I'm going to try to keep this simple, the same thing. What is illumination? And I will get into what Shankara describes it. As I mentioned, I've heard many times, what does it mean to living God, living consciousness, the total joy? And let me tell you a couple mistakes I made. So here's another personalization. Many, many years ago, in other practices, I actually believed, another embarrassing statement of mine, that we could get to a point, and maybe some yogis do. I've read about it, of total cause, of total... I really believe that we could get to a point where the body never died. Well, look, when they say we're alive forever, we're talking spiritually we're alive forever. And I thought it was really beautiful in the book Shankara. At the very end, he said, look, the body's going to die. That's just the way it goes. That's not what we're concerned about. We're concerned about the consciousness, the spirit. Atman, Brahman, all of those same words for the same thing. I thought that was pretty cool. And the whole idea that... Another way, the whole idea that we're going to gain all these great skills to be able to move a pencil across the desk with our minds. Ramakrishna is great. He said, well, who cares? What we really want it to do is become illuminated, self-realization, find God. And I really believe that's true. In fact, so much so that these other things, well, who cares? Who cares if I can make a book, throw across the room without throwing it? I don't know. I mean, it almost sounds silly, but years ago I thought that was really cool. The idea that we could do that. And that doesn't mean we aren't going to gain skills as we meditate or let go of the coverings that prevent us of knowing who we are. It doesn't mean we won't, but let's not get all jacked up about it. Another really interesting thing that Ramakrishna brought up, and I thought this was really beautiful and really, really important, is that let's just talk about the samadhi. We can get into a state of bliss and purity. But when we come out of it and we get into life, like as a householder, we've got to go out and work, we've got to make money, we're having kids, we've got to do things. So how does that work? Well, he used an interesting analogy, and he talked about two glasses. And let's say you are a pure, clear glass of water. Well, maybe you can experience that. Maybe that's what we call nirvikalpa samadhi. But when we go out in the world is a colored glass of water. It's cloudy. And we can't help but have that reflect into us a bit. Maybe a lot. And I believe when he talked about these glasses of water, that's why he said sometimes that's why you need to meditate, even if you had self-realization. So I think that's really important to recognize that I used to have the false idea that maybe if I gained this bliss or self-realization, that nothing, that clouded world couldn't ever cloud me. And maybe there's a place where few yogis make it to where it won't, but I can't visualize that. I can't see it. I don't know how. I can see how that pure glass of water can stay pretty pure, but man, there's stuff going on out there. That's one of the reasons I also like meditation, is that even if you've arrived at new levels of awareness, you always have a tool that you can use to continue to expand, or let's say recover what you had gained. And I think that's really, really important. So let's go to the next little point here. I think this is really nice. Now we're into the book Shankara, the crest jewel of discrimination. And he has a little section, page 104 and 105, 106, where he talks about illumination. And in it, I'll just read this definition. He says, a state of illumination is described as follows. There is a continuous consciousness of the unity of Atman and Brahman. Atman is, in a simple way, you as a spirit. Brahman is the whole oneness, God, all consciousness. And so there becomes a continuous consciousness, awareness of that unity. There is no longer any identification of the Atman and its coverings. That's really important. So you are no longer being identified or attached to the body, the mind, all of these coverings. You are aware of there's a self-realization of who you are. All sense of duality is obliterated. There is pure, unified consciousness. The man who is well established in the consciousness is said to be illumined. Sometimes, I suppose, I think that's just really great. I think there it is. I think each of us has to look at that and wonder, how far can we take it? Where does self-realization take us? I just keep meditating and keep making gains. It seems like as I meditate, it gets more and more simple that all there is one. All there is that point, and everything else is just attachment or fluff. That might sound rather silly or stupid. I don't know how to describe it. I was at a talk with one of the swamis was giving, and he said so many people when they're meditating and they have great experiences, they can't describe it. So it's always saying something by using the word like. Is that metaphorical speaking? I can't remember from my schooling. But you have to say it's like this, it's like that. Because what is pure consciousness? It's beyond the words anyway. But anyway, there's our definition of illumined. And so this is kind of wild. Let's kind of see how this works. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pull this off because I'm just going to read from the book. And I think it's better just to say, here's the exact pages. And in this follows what I just showed you on the definition of illumined. And I think it's really interesting, and I'm just going to read it as best I can. It says, a man is said to be free even in this life when he's established in illumination. His bliss is unending. Man, that's something. I don't even know if that means in meditation or in all aspects of life. He almost forgets this world of appearances. I think that's a great line. I know that I've wandered around, and sometimes I'm amazed to see or recognize how involved I was in stuff and how not involved I am in stuff. Do I think I'm some grand self-realization or illumined? No, but I can relate to that little line there. I think that's really interesting. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think this is really interesting, these chapters, or these 2 pages I'm going to show you, because I think these are some of the things that we learn as we're moving on our path. How about that? Vivekananda once said, when you start meditating, you'll start to know you're getting results because you're happier. You feel more joy. What a beautiful gauge. So these are like little gauges. And he doesn't even say it's always. He just says he almost forgets the world of appearances. Then it says, even though his mind is dissolved in Brahman, living in God, he's fully awake, free from the ignorance of waking life. He's fully conscious, but free from any craving. Such a man is said to be free even in this life. You see, that's that whole thing of we can become totally free, but what about living? And I think these pages help us in that respect. Cravings, we have to get rid of these cravings. I had a ton of cravings throughout my life. And I must say, again, there's a gauge. How many of those have shifted or just be gone? I can imagine somebody saying, well, those cravings are gone because you're old. No, sorry. For him, the sorrows of this world are over. Though he possesses a finite body, he remains united with the infinite. I can relate. His heart knows no anxiety. Eh. Such a man is said to be free even in this life. Every little chapter ends that way. I still get anxious about certain things. I talked about it. I think I called it fear. A video with fear in it. And yeah, I still get some anxieties. Much less, though. Again, these are almost, again, gauges or ways that you can see how you've changed. And as your awareness shifts, you're still just sitting there going, well, I have this fear, I have this anxiety. Yeah. Well, don't get disappointed because maybe you had 10 of those before and now you only have 2. Though he lives in the body, it seems merely like a shadow following him. He's no longer troubled by the thought of I or mine. Boy, I can relate to this one. Such are the characteristics of a man who is free even in this life. He does not care to delve into the past. This is very real. Sometimes, I read somewhere where sometimes the more you meditate, the more you just forget the past. He's not interested in scanning the future. He is indifferent to the present. That is how you may know the man who is free even in this life. Interesting. Good and evil appear to exist in the world. I did a video on how to deal with difficult people. Evil does exist. I think it was Ramakrishna that talked about evil exists, and sometimes you have to learn to hiss. So as a householder, we have to deal with these things. I can't remember exactly. Buddha said, I believe the same thing. Persons and objects seem to be distinct from each other. Nevertheless, he regards everything from the standpoint of equality, for he sees Brahman in all. I think that's an amazingly powerful line. That is how you may know the man who is free even in this life. Good or evil fortune may come. Yes, we're living in this world. Things can happen. So the idea that we'll never have a problem is an absurdity. The idea that we can't have a challenge in life. And in fact, as the great Vivekananda said, that's probably when we make the most gains, when we're having to deal with challenges. Good or evil fortune may come. He regards them both with indifference and remains unaffected by either. That's really powerful. And the last line, it's not even all there, but I'm just going to read the beginning. Because his mind is continually engaged in tasting the bliss of Brahman. I'm just going to leave it at that. I think this is really, really good. It just gives us gauges, thermometers, where we are, how we're evolving on our path. It also helps us know where we're going. But I think most importantly, it's the idea, again, of where we're going, but also maybe as difference from somebody who's a completely involved, let's say, in a monastery or a monk, but how is a householder living in the world. And I just think these are beautiful. I hope everybody benefits in a way from them just by reading it. But that's what I got out of it. And it took me away from false expectations that I gained from the 60s and 70s and 80s. I think that's the best way to put it. Life flows by. He watches it like a disinterested spectator. He does not identify himself with the body or the sense organs. Those are the coverings. He's risen above the idea of duty. That is how you may know the man who is free even in this life. That's interesting. I'm just realizing just now, just this week, I had that, again, it was like this, but I was wandering around, looking around going, it was as if the world was just moving along and I was not attached to any of it. And again, it's the cravings or the resistance that would attach you. And if you are unattached, it was actually like it was just a spectator. Didn't last for long. It was a good day or two. But there's that line. So in meditation, these things can happen. He watches it like a disinterested spectator. That's not me saying it. That's about it. Of course, I value the Shankara. Maybe if you read this book, you'll value it too. By the help of the living words of the scriptures, he has realized his oneness with Brahman. I haven't even read this. I read this in the past, but not as I was doing this video. He is no longer bound to rebirth. Woo! I'm going to go to the next one. He never identifies himself with the body or the sense organs. He has no feeling of ownership. Have you ever sat around and thought, I mean, some people, their car or their house or whatever, I don't know. I can tell you that for years and years and years, even before I started meditating, I never felt the house was mine. It's just a thing. I think that's kind of interesting. He never identifies himself with the body or sense organs. He has no feeling of ownership. I don't know how you can unless you're being a gem or an ego or a body. Then you go, it's mine. But if you're being spirit consciousness or an all is one, yeah. Think about that one. I think these are just great comments that Shankara made. Through his transcendental vision, he has realized there's no difference between man and Brahman or between Brahman and the universe, for he sees that Brahman is all. Wow. Holy men may honor him, evil men may insult him. His feelings are the same. Rivers, yeah, this is a good one. Rivers flow into the ocean, but the ocean is not disturbed. So stuff's happening. He's still in the world. Stuff is happening. The colored glass might flow in, but he's not disturbed. Sense objects flow into his mind. Sense objects are those things that can create craving. They flow into the mind, but he feels no reaction, for he lives in the consciousness of the one reality. He is free indeed, even in this life. I think those 2 pages are immensely important and powerful and enlightening. And I wish I would have fully duplicated this years ago, because I feel in a way all of my activities were headed to a false goal. And I believe, and the purpose of this video is to clarify in a way where I believe I am headed, maybe others. I believe this is pretty powerful stuff, and I think it affects a lot of people, but you have to make that choice. Yeah, but it also gets rid of false goals, and those can be immensely harmful, or they can really be a roadblock. So again, we get into roadblocks. Maybe one of my first videos was about Vedanta Hinduism and the roadblocks I encountered. Maybe all of these videos are really just clearing up roadblocks. And so this one is a roadblock by misunderstanding what illumination is. Yeah, so I think I'll just actually, that's probably the end. Yeah, I don't know if I have any, just had a little realization on that. So, yeah, who knows exactly what's going to happen to each of us, but there's some great guidelines and guideposts and gauges. I'm just glad that, especially if you're watching these, you're probably on a path, and I'm glad for all religions and for all that are trying to find that self-realization, illumination, and spirit within and without. Yep. Okay. Without meaning Brahman. All right, that's it.